With the cost of heating bills more than doubling this year in the UK, village halls are having to come up with some innovative solutions. Hi everyone, I'm Johnny Thompson and welcome once again to the Village Halls podcast sponsored by Allied Westminster, the UK's largest specialist provider of village hall insurance and the home of Village Guard. Now, we all know that energy costs have gone through the roof recently, and this has presented a big challenge to community buildings up and down the country. However, Shustoke Village Hall in the West Midlands has thought of a great idea that not only improves the efficiency of their heating system, but also makes it a little bit easier and more comfortable for anyone organising events there. Today, I've been joined by Nick Cole from Shustoke, who's going to tell us all about it. Hi, Nick. And many thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Johnny. Many thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, no, thanks for coming on. And
pleasure.
Before we get on to talking about how you've been tinkering, I guess, with the heating and the technology at the hall, tell me a little bit about you and what you do, and also your connection with the village and the hall there at Shustoke.
Well, my background is in IT, which, as we'll come on to discuss, was quite helpful with all of this.
Yeah.
I've worked in IT in the corporate environment. I've been a freelancer for more than 10 years as well. And these days I've got quite a handful of voluntary roles that I undertake as well. So as obviously I look after the village hall in Shustoke, but I'm a parish councillor in Shustoke as well. And I'm also a member of the Warwickshire Search and Rescue Team, which is
Brilliant.
A bit like mountain rescue, but in the lowland parts of the country.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so I've lived in Shustoke Shustoke is a small rural village in Warwickshire out to the east, sort of halfway between Birmingham and Coventry, which is much nicer than that sounds, actually. there is a green bit in between.
Yeah, brilliant.
And it's one of those villages where, unless you're sort of third generation, then you're still a new boy. So I'm definitely a new boy. I've only been here about 5 years. But my partner, Rebecca, her family have lived here for many years. So they're much more kind of dyed in the wool. And we just live in a little cottage. It's a village of only, I think it's about 250 households, about 500 residents, I think. So it's quite small.
Yeah. What's your motivation to volunteer as you do?
I guess you just get to that stage in life, don't you, where I know it's a terrible cliche, but you do want to try and give something back, and harness the skills that you've built up through your career, but in a different way. Whether it's discussing the heady matters that we have at the parish council, or working out how to raise funds for your search and rescue charity, as I do. I really enjoy it.
Now, the hall, I guess. A good place to start is to mention how it's often unattended, isn't it? And you hire out on a bit of a DIY basis. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm sure this is not unusual, but it's a lovely hall, actually. It's a sort of a Goldilocks kind of size, if you know what I mean. It's not too big, it's not too small. It's probably about 100 years. It's that sort of age of building, so it's got a nice bit of character. Yeah. But yeah, it's unattended. There's no, sort of offices there with people who are there in working hours or anything. So we have regular users who do things like yoga, Pilates, after-school tuition, music groups for toddlers, all that sort of stuff. They have regular slots through the week, and then we have one-off users booking the hall for, a child's birthday party or a christening or, whatever you like, really. So, when people use the hall, I explain to them how they're going to get into the hall and what they need to bring, what they need to take away, all that sort of stuff. But it's all, as you say, it's DIY and unattended.
And this kind of way of working presented a few problems for you when it came to the heating system. Talk me through some of those problems, Nick.
Sure. Well, just to explain the heating system, I imagine, again, this is not unique, but it's a sort of two-stage system in that there's a gas boiler, which looks just like a domestic. It probably is a domestic gas boiler that's mounted on the wall. That runs on gas, and it heats a little circuit. There's one radiator, and then the rest of the circuit just goes out to some warm air blowers that are in the main hall, and that generates warm air that blows out into the hall. And actually, it runs on. We don't have mains gas, so it runs on bottled gas. And this it increased the anxiety about the problem, if you like, in that when the gas just comes through a pipe, obviously you can look at your meter and see the little numbers going around. But when you have to wrestle with 5 foot tall orange things, you're very conscious of how quickly, how quickly or otherwise you're going through the gas.
It becomes very tangible.
I have to go. It really does. Yeah, I have to go down to the hall, particularly through the winter. I'm down there at least once a week, checking to see whether there's a bottle that's empty, it needs changing around, do I need to order some new ones, that kind of thing. So A, it's a bit painful, but B, as you say, it makes it really tangible how quickly you're getting through your gas. And the original system was just a thermostat on the wall, and when a hall user arrived, they would flick the thermostat from basically frost protection up to 30, knowing most people who use a really tall, put it to a temperature where the boiler would lurch into action.
Heat up.
Yeah, but then it would take 15, 20 minutes for the system to actually warm up, and the blowers don't start. The blowers won't work until they've got a heat supply themselves, and so you weren't actually starting to get warm air into the hall for sort of 15, 20 minutes after you've come in there, which on a winter's morning when you're about to run a yoga class is not great. And the other, I guess the problem that I started with this is that it wasn't difficult for people to forget to turn the heating off. They would almost invariably turn the warm air blowers off, but unless you turn the thermostat back down, then the boiler would still be on. And as I say, with the hall being unattended, it might be 24 hours nearly until the next person comes into the hall. So the boiler's just firing away to itself, potentially, all night and all through the next day. And once that's happened a few times, you really start to worry about how quickly, how much gas you're using. And that was, I'm going back a couple of years now.
Yes, exactly. Now
you fast forward that.
The cost of energy.
You fast forward that.
Cost of energy rocketing. I would imagine it's making the heating the hall increasingly expensive. Yeah.
Very much so. Yeah. And so, what started out as trying to work out how to solve the problem and have, remote access to the heating, basically. That's where it all started.
So you got your thinking caps on and came up with a great way of managing things by introducing a bit of technology, right?
I did, yeah. It's one of those situations where I don't know, Johnny, whether you have, a nest or a hive or whatever in your home, but once you've had one, it's one of those things that it'd be quite difficult to go back on.
No, I mean, I'm a great lover of technology, but I guess there'll be some people out there who have no idea what a nest or a hive may be.
Right.
So that's probably a great place for us to start. If you kind of explain very simply what this technology is kind of capable of doing.
Okay. Yeah. Well, in its most basic form, it's a thermostat which is connected to the internet in the same way that your Alexa is, or a smart plug that can turn a lamp on and off or whatever from an app on your phone. So I put, in this case, it was a Hive, which is, I think that's the British Gas one, a Hive thermostat in my house, connected it up to the boiler. And that means that wherever you are, whether you're in the house or whether you're at the other end of the country or in a different country, you can turn your heating on and off. And you can set all sorts of schedules, and you can get it to alert you if the temperature in your house drops below, a particular temperature, all that kind of thing. It's a great thing. And so with that experience from my home life, I thought, well, this is obviously the way to go with the village hall.
Absolutely.
And I just started off by thinking, I need to be able to control that heating remotely, because I don't live far from the hall, but it's a 10-minute walk at least. And if it's 11 o'clock at night and I suddenly think, I wonder if that person's, switched off the heating at the hall, I don't want to have to trudge down there in the darkness. So that's where it started. And as we went into lockdown, it did, as I'm sure many halls did, it presented an opportunity to tackle a few jobs that would be harder to do when there were people using the hall every day. So I got an internet connection fitted. That's the first thing that we needed. We didn't have that. We had a phone line that wasn't in use, so I just got that back in action so that we had broadband at the hall. And then in this case, I bought a Nest, which is just the Google version of I have a Hive. It's exactly the same sort of thing. And I just bought one so it was different to what I had at home. It was literally as simple as that. And connected it up. You basically connect it to your boiler so that the boiler is always ready to go. And when it gets the thumbs up from the Nest thermostat to say, right, well, I'm supposed to be on now, then the boiler fires up and off it goes.
Excellent.
And that's where it started. And in fact, I think the first thing I did was I just put a very simple sort of automation on that, which was that at 11 o'clock every night, it would turn the heating
I was going to
off.
say, because it would get a bit labour intensive, wouldn't it? You'd have to look at the schedule, who's coming when, try and turn it on before they were getting there, try and remember to turn it off if you were doing it all manually. So
yeah, and that's exactly where I started. So that there is a kind of heating schedule in the app that comes with Nest, and you can set your schedule, but it's all really designed around, you know, a nuclear family living in a house and going out to school and work and all that kind of thing. It's not really designed to come on and off at completely random times, just for an hour here and an hour there, depending on when people are using the hall. So you're absolutely right. It was quite labour intensive, because I had to carefully set up the schedule for all of my regular users, but then every week I had to check to see whether there was anybody else using the hall for a party or whatever, and put them into the schedule, and then remember to take them out again. And you know, it was quite hard work. Well, not hard work, but you know, it was still not super convenient.
So you came up with a bit of a solution for that, and I guess you're going to have to explain a little bit of modern technology or app technology to describe what you did next. Yes.
So that's where I'd got to. The heating was coming on and off, driven by the Nest. I could switch it off and on and off remotely. So we've moved forward, but it's still not ideal. And then for something completely different, I had done a bit of dabbling with a service called If This Then That, or IFTTT, which is a really cool service, and it's actually very nicely set up. There's lots of sort of point and click, and it's not very difficult to use, actually. But all it is a way of connecting, I suppose, triggers to actions or
it's
whatever.
It's kind of in the description, isn't it? It's if this happens or this takes place, then that is going to happen afterwards, and it's a case of just programming it, isn't it, to make something happen?
Yeah, and actually a really simple example of that is, as many people do, I've got a light in my lounge at home, which I like to come on in the evening, whether I'm there or not. But rather than, like, my mum's got one as well, and she's got one of those mechanical timer things that's plugged into the plug socket, and it ticks its way around, and she fiddles around with the little plastic bits, and the light pops on at 6 o'clock in the evening or whatever. But as the seasons change, the time that you want the light to come on changes. Whereas my one, I've set it up with If This Then That, so it goes and has a look at what time sunset is in Shustoke,
right?
And an hour before that, it turns the light on.
Brilliant.
So it comes on at a different time every day. So that's a very simple example how you can use this sort of thing. And the great thing with IFTTT is that they have built loads and loads of integrations, which I guess is a bit of an IT word, isn't it? But just they've made connections with lots and lots of useful things. And when I started to look at this, I actually sort of started by thinking that, wow, this is going to take me 5 minutes, because they have created a connection to Google Calendar, and they've also created a connection to Nest. So I'm thinking, well, great. If I create a Google Calendar and all that exists in that calendar is the bookings for the village hall, whether they're regular bookings or one-off bookings, then that's my if bit. That's my trigger. That's my condition that needs to be met.
If there's a booking,
And it's literally, and in fact, it's even better than that. The way when you set up that rule, it's driven by an event starting in the Google Calendar that you just connected to, and you can even tell it to sort of run for the condition to be true 30 minutes before the event starts. Brilliant. You know, so now I can get the heating to come on in time for it to the warm when the user turns up. That's good. It would have been great if that was the end of my story, but in fact, the Nest integration doesn't work anymore for some strange reason, because Nest used to be, it was a startup company. They built their own thing. and they had a connection with IFTT, and it was brilliant. And then Nest was bought by Google, and for reasons not known to me, presumably Google know, but they decided to get rid of this connection to IFTTT. So I ended up, and I won't bore you with the detail, but I ended up having to hand code exact sort of a native access to the Nest thermostat, which actually took me ages. It took me weeks and weeks of thrashing away at this thing. But for example, I understand that the Hive integration is just, okay, so you've set up your Google Calendar bit, and then then that piece is, well, tell my Hive thermostat to come on. And it could have been as simple as that. So I think in hindsight, if I'd done a bit more research and looked at how the automation worked before I set off, then I would have just bought a Hive and it would have been really easy
to do it that way. Yeah.
Life's not like that.
But in essence, what you're saying is you've been able to create a system, and there's a way of very simply creating this if you choose the right equipment. Let's just leave it at that. That when someone arrives to give like a Pilates class or some other activity event, the heating's already up to temperature for them, which is great for them. And then, of course, they don't have to remember to switch it off either, because all of that happens automatically as well, presumably.
It does, yeah. There's another, these are separate IFTTT rules. It's very sort of granular, if you like. But yeah, there's another rule that says when an event ends in that Google Calendar, then turn the heating off again, please. And in fact, it doesn't turn the heating off. It puts it back into frost protection mode. So, you still got that kind of protection if we had a really, really cold snap. You don't want your pipes bursting. So yeah. And in fact, if we have users that overstay their welcome, then the fact that the halls start to get cold is a reminder for them to leave.
Very good.
It's all controlled from the cloud.
Brilliant.
So yeah, it's great.
Now, obviously, as you've mentioned, you've got a background in IT. I guess, people listen to about IFTTT and so on and are now thinking, well, you know what you're doing, it's very easy for you. But like, how easy is it in reality for somebody to set something like this up? And I know you've had your teeth and troubles, as you've mentioned, but taking a system, like Hive and connecting it to IFTTT, how, in reality, Nick, how difficult is this?
Oh, it's really easy. This is designed for non-technical people to use, definitely. I'm trying to think of a good analogy of how complicated it is. If you can buy music to listen to on your phone, or do your groceries from an app on your phone. It's just about,
if you're reasonably familiar with modern kind of smartphone technology and using your laptop at work or something like that, then you should be able to handle this no problem. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's a very nice interface actually in the IFTTT, and there's sort of different categories of triggers and different categories of actions, and you just kind of browse through them and you can search and it's very straightforward.
And what about the costs, Nick? The like for the Hive system, just roughly, and setting up an IFTTT itself. What are we talking about here? Well,
your internet-enabled thermostat, I think these days they're about sort of £150.
Yeah,
maybe up to 200. I can't quite remember actually how much I paid for the Nest, but it's of that sort of order of magnitude.
Yeah,
and probably the most complicated bit actually is connecting the thermostat to the boiler, because every boiler seems to be different in terms of where the wires go. So you need an electrician to do that, really. And then IFTTT is free. I think as long as I think it restricts you to the number of different routines or applets or whatever they call them that you've got active. But I think you get up to about 3 or 4 or 5 or something for nothing. So
right. So you're pretty quickly going to be able to recoup your costs in essence because of what's happened with all of the heating costs. I mean, what are you expecting? The heating costs to be, and what kind of difference are you expecting this to make over the winter months ahead? A lot more than £100 to £200, I would have thought. Yeah,
and obviously, it just keeps paying back. I think it's hard to predict your energy bills at the moment, isn't it? But I think we'll end up spending around £1,500 on gas through this financial year, if you like, which our year runs from April to the end of March.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't be surprised if we were saving, 15-20% of that, so 20% would be £300, wouldn't it?
Yeah. In the winter alone, this is easily going to cover the cost of.
I think so.
And then you've got the long-term savings that you're going to make subsequent to that.
Yeah, and it's just it's more convenient for me. It's more convenient for the users. Yeah, it's been really good.
The thing I really like about what you've come up with there at Shustoke as well is the fact that you've not only introduced something that helps with the energy efficiency and controls the costs, but it's also something that improves the whole experience for the users of the hall too, because they're under no pressure to have to remember to turn the heating off effectively. And as you've said, you've set the system up so that it gets it to a nice, comfortable temperature for people immediately there, class starts. So all around, it's just an absolutely brilliant idea, Nick, and well done with this.
Well, I wish I could say that I had this sort of fantastic vision of how this would unfold, but as hopefully I've given the impression of, it wasn't like that. It was sort of one step after another. You just you get to the next. You suddenly think, I could do that. That would be better.
Yeah.
But it is good. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just through your experimentation, you've come up with something. It's something as well that sounds like it could, be introduced by other halls. So if there's anyone out there listening, is thinking of doing something similar, it sounds like, they could quite easily achieve this as well.
Yes, definitely. Particularly if you've already got an internet connection at your hall. We didn't, but then again, that's another benefit that increasingly people expect a community space like a hall to have an internet connection and Wi-Fi so that they can stream birthday songs or whatever it is. Through lockdown, actually, or as we came out of lockdown, some of the people who were doing yoga classes and that sort of thing, they were live streaming their classes that they were doing in the hall, so that if you wanted to come to the hall and do it in person, you could. But if you were still perhaps shielding or whatever, and you needed to do it from home, then you could. So having the internet connection has been a great benefit as well. Yeah.
Great stuff. And thanks for your honesty, by the way, for, not trying to backtrack and say that you had this wonderful all-encompassing idea, but that you really just made it up as you went along.
Well, isn't that always the best way?
It is. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. It's how we do the podcast, of course, as well, Excellent. Well, I'm also delighted to announce that Shustoke Village Hall has been nominated for our Wonderful Villages Innovation Award for what they've been doing with the heating system there. So good luck with that, Nick, when the judges start looking at all of the awards entries that they've received very soon.
Thank you very much. Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah, no, well done. And thanks again for coming on and talking about this. As I said, I hope halls listening in, pick up on this idea and look at whether it's something that could work for them too.
Yeah, the more the people that can use this sort of thing, the better, I'm sure. Yeah,
definitely. And that's the whole idea as well behind the Innovation Award, of course, is we can share some ideas across the fantastic Village Hall network that's out there. So brilliant. Thanks again, Nick.
No, that's my pleasure. And I would hope that, other people will pick up with this, pick this up and run with it and come up with, the next stages, the next improvements. I'd really be really interested to hear what other people then go, oh, well, if you've got that far, you can do this. And
you could do this.
So,
yeah.
So hopefully I'll benefit from that as well.
Perfect. Well, yeah. Well, if you've got any ideas out there how the system can be developed further, drop us an email. You can find all of the contact information on our website. But thanks again, Nick, and that's it, I guess, for this episode. A reminder, talking about the Wonderful Village Awards, that the 2022 entries close very soon on the 31st of October. So if you haven't entered already, get in quick. And thanks, by the way, to everyone who's entered already. If you haven't heard from us yet, we'll be acknowledging your entries in the coming weeks. And we'll also be back soon to explain exactly what will be happening next with the judging and when you can expect to hear the results of this year's awards and the 5 halls that will each be receiving £1,000. Thanks, as always, to our headline sponsor and specialist insurance provider, Allied Westminster, for making our podcast possible and whose services you can discover more about at villageguard.com, and to online booking system provider Hallmaster, who also sponsor our podcast and can be found at hallmaster.co.uk. You've been listening to the Village Halls podcast, a unique listening community for Britain's village, church and community halls and anyone interested in the vital community services they provide. We'll be back again soon with another episode, so please visit thevillagehallspodcast.com to subscribe, sign up for updates, link through to our social media pages and just to find out more. But until the next time, goodbye for now.